and frigid Friday, thousands choke the streets of downtown Minneapolis.
Good afternoon, I'm Kevin Coe, coming to you live right outside the Hennepin County Government Center. And as you can see, you have a massive crowd around with tens of thousands of people currently
Two American citizens dead. Thousands in the streets every day. Whistles blocked roads, viral videos non-stop. Minnesota looks like it's under siege over ICE raids. But here is the question many ask. Was Minnesota actually singled out for mass deportations? Or is it something much bigger happening here? Today, we are laying out the facts, the funding, the patterns, the uncomfortable truth that explains everything. December 2025, President Trump launches Operation Metro Surge, the largest single immigration enforcement operation in U.S. history. By early February 2026, DHS reports that federal agents had made more than 4,000 arrests of criminal illegal aliens right here in Minnesota. People with convictions for murder, rape, gang activity, child abuse, and other serious crimes. But here is what people talked about at the exact same time, just days before the surge really kicked off. A 23-year-old independent journalist named Shirley, working with investigator David Hawk, dropped a 42-minute investigative video exposing what he called one of the largest taxpayer fraud scandals in Minnesota history. He filmed empty or barely operating daycare centers, many semi-run, that were still collecting millions in state and federal funds. His investigation pointed to $9 billion in potential recoverable funds and claimed that up to half of an $18 billion slice of certain Medicaid-funded programs may have been misused. While this bombshell was dropping in Minnesota, the paid media machine spent the next 2 months hammering the exact same narrative. Why is the Trump administration singling out Team Walz in the state of Minnesota? They kept repeating that there are plenty of red states with far more illegal immigrants than Minnesota. So let's look at the actual numbers. Nationwide, DHS officially reports more than 675,000 formal deportations since President Trump took office. 375,000 reported by the conservative stats from the University of Berkeley on January 20th, 2026. On top of that, the administration says another 2.2 million people have self-deported, many of them using the CBP Home app, taking a free flight home plus a stipend that's now up to $2,600. Yes, you still pay for it. That's nearly 3 million illegal aliens out of the country in just 1 year. Enforcement is way up, no debate. Quick reminder, 3.36 million were deported during the Obama's administration. One may assume that the voters' pool dilution started later. But here is what the national media barely mentioned. This isn't happening only in Minnesota. Compare the real scale. Texas, the clear leader, is currently holding nearly 19,000 people in ICE detention. That's more than the next 3 states combined. California has over 6,400 in detention. Florida has more than 5,200. And those are just current detention numbers. In the first half of 2025 alone, Texas, Florida, and California accounted for the highest total ICE arrests in the entire country, with Texas running 20 to 30 times the daily arrest rate at Minnesota at its peak. So Minnesota's 4,000 arrests during Operation Metro Surge? Yeah, that's real action. It took dangerous people off Minnesota's streets. But it's still just a tiny slice of the national total. And here is something else the Department of Homeland Security has repeatedly highlighted. A big chunk of the people being removed from nationwide aren't first-timers. Many are repeated offenders, people who had already been deported 3, 4, even 5 times before coming back illegally. A large number also had serious criminal records, murderers, child predators, gang members, and violent felons. Independent trackers admit that as total arrests exploded, the percentage of people with criminal convictions dropped to around 60% overall, with violent convictions making up a smaller share. But the raw volume of enforcement, especially against repeated crossers and criminals, has been massive in every major state. So the question remains, if Minnesota wasn't singled out by the numbers, why did it get all the national attention? Tragically, 2 U.S. citizens lost their lives during the operation. January 7th, Renee Good was shot by an ICE agent during a vehicle confrontation while she was near an enforcement scene. January 24th, Alex Pretty, an ICU nurse, was shot by a CBP agent during a protest interaction. He was carrying a handgun under the state permit. Quick note on the Second Amendment debate. Carrying a firearm to a protest is a protected right in Minnesota. Both individuals were promoted, provoked, incited to participate in the event. Good came as so-called legal observer from Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey, Minneapolis AG Keith Ellison, Representative Elman Omar, and city leaders. Legal observer or community monitor, someone who shows up to document and support neighbors during law enforcement actions. Alex Pretty, prior involvement on January 13, 2026, 11 days before his death. Videos showed him confronting ICE agents during a family chase incident. He shouted, blew a whistle, allegedly kicked a vehicle taillight, and was tackled, sustained a broken rib. This highlighted his role as a community observer, protester monitoring federal actions. He was particularly motivated by the January 7, 2026 fatal shooting of Renee Nicole Macklin Good. The issue here is not the law, but the common sense. Everyone trained and who carry a weapon every day Everyone trained and who carry a weapon every day would know the choice. As these cases show, in a high-tension situation, it can turn deadly fast. Both sides agree these deaths were heartbreaking. The debate is over what led to them. Now here where it gets interesting. The entire sequence feels identical. 2020, George Floyd, BLM and Antifa takeovers, cities declaring autonomous zones, 23-24, Pro-Palestine campus and city protests, recent Pro-Venezuela demonstrations. We have a video on the subject, click the link in the description. Same rapid organization, same professional signage and messaging, same tactics, whistles, live streaming, blocking streets, turning every incident into national news within hours. These aren't organic neighborhood gatherings. They follow a proven playbook. These protests exploded within days, exactly like the previous waves. The main organizing groups on the ground in Minnesota, the People's Forum and the Party for Socialism and Liberation. Multiple investigations by Fox News, New York Post, congressional committees trace major funding back to one man, Neville Roy Singham, a US tech millionaire now living in Shanghai with well-documented ties to the Chinese Communist Party. Congressional committees, for example, Ways and Means, and the FBI have investigated these flows for foreign influence. He and his network funneled over 20 million to the People's Forum alone between 2017 and 22, plus much more through dark money channels. George Soros, Open Society foundations, local groups like Invisible Twin Cities, an offshoot of the National Indivisible Project, reportedly received millions, 7 to 8 millions between 2018 and 2023 per public records, from Soros-linked entities. Indivisible has been involved in leading protests against ICE raid in Minnesota. Other mentioned networks and groups, Tides Foundation, Arabella Advisors, Rockefeller-linked funds, and similar dark money NGOs allegedly contributed tens of millions overall. One X-analysis claimed over 65 million to various Minnesota anti-ICE groups. Additional organizers, funders cited Council on American Islamic Relations, Minnesota, Unidos Minnesota, Sunrise Movement, Headwaters Foundation, local grants to groups like MISNA, COPAL, Centro de Trabajadores Unidos, labor unions, example SEIU, AFS-CME, AFT, CWA, and coalitions like ICE out of Minnesota. Some reports mentioned broader left-wing billionaire donors or foreign-linked money exploiting US nonprofit laws. Same groups, same funders. Behind the Pro-Palestine and other rapid response protest waves, this isn't moms and dads waking up angry. This is professional, pre-funded activism. So, if the hard numbers don't justify the outrage, and these protests are clearly well organized and well funded, then what's really going on? The true issue isn't immigration enforcement. It's vote dilution and voter delusion. Only American citizens are allowed to vote. Only citizens are supposed to decide elections, choose our leaders, and bear the financial consequences of those decisions. Yet for years, millions of people who entered the country illegally have been allowed to stay, many for 20 years or longer without ever going through the legal immigration process. Let's be clear. The legal path to citizenship or permanent residency takes roughly 1 to 5 years, depending on individual case. That's it. These aren't people patiently waiting in line to assimilate into American culture. This isn't immigration. This is invasion by demographic replacement. And because they are counted in the US Census, every single one of them artificially inflates a state's population. That single number does 3 things. It dilutes the voting power of every legal citizen. It skews elections outcomes. It gives extra congressional seats and electoral college votes to sanctuary states that protect them. In short, the more illegal aliens are state harbors, the more power it steals from actual American citizens in the rest of the country. And while Minnesota obsesses over resisting ICE and removing criminal illegal aliens from the streets, the state has ignored, or outright enabled, massive fraud scandals on Governor Tim Walz's watch. The Feeding Our Future scandal, over $250 million stolen from child nutrition programs, broader child care and social services fraud, billions in taxpayers' money allegedly misused, laundered, and in some cases, sent overseas. Multiple congressional investigations, House oversight, and Senate finance are still demanding answers on why the Walz administration failed to stop it, or even appeared to look the other way. Yet, the biggest outrage in Minnesota right now is federal agents finally removing people who have been living here illegally for decades. That's not a policy disagreement. That's delusion. So is Minnesota special? Or is it just the clearest example of what happens when well-funded activist networks meet voters who refuse to look at the numbers and their own state's failures? The pattern is obvious once you see it. Drop your thoughts below. Do you think the protests are grassroots or coordinated? Should Minnesota be focusing more on cleaning up its own act? Originally, this was going to be just another standard CSM Intel editorial video. Our third episode in the series was planned to cover the topic closest to our hearts, the militia. But as we dug deeper and saw how heavily the situation has been manipulated and twisted, the story took on a life of its own and became a full standalone episode, Substitution of Terms. We are still hard at work on the next episode, and we are also turning the entire CSM Recruit Manual into a complete video training series. Your support and contributions are making all of this possible. Thank you. They really do go a long way. Like this video if you want more no-spin breakdowns, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Let us not fall for appealing headlines. Control our emotions. And remember, always positive.